We need more policy explainers.
What if I told you council tax was the biggest tax dodge of all time? I'm Rachel, I'm a public and social policy consultant, and I believe that understanding public policy is the only way to fight it. And for reasons I won't bore you with, I am a council tax expert. So what I know is now what you know. Now, the Green Party are targeting landlords and landowners in their policies at the moment. And I think once we understand sort of where property taxation and where council tax comes from, we'll all see exactly the sleight of hand that the wealthy have been playing on us for hundreds of years. Buckle up, this is about property taxation, but I promise you it's not going to be boring. Now, let's go back to pre-1600, when the wealthy landowners, lords of the land, were responsible, because it was in their own best interests, to help the peasants on their land to be kind of disease-free, if you will, and so they didn't starve completely, basically so they wouldn't revolt against the lord of the land, and so that the crown would have a healthy enough population from which to draw an army, an armed force, should they need it. As towns and villages started to emerge, the upkeep of the poor started to become a little bit more expensive than the lords of the land were willing to pay. And in 1601, the parish councils were created as overseers of the poor, and we had something called the Poor Law and poor taxes, which again was taxes that they created from the wealthy in order to have people not starve and kind of pestilence outbreaks or, plague outbreaks, that kind of stuff. Again, because it was in their best interest, we do not want the peasants to revolt, and we want to have a healthy enough population from which to draw an army. Now, as those villages and towns turned into towns and cities, and we fast forward a couple of hundred years to the Industrial Revolution, the wealthy landowners have now become capitalists and industrialists, and they're still responsible kind of for keeping the poor or the working classes in a healthy enough condition from which to draw an army and a workforce. But the cost of these, let's call them social services, was starting to become more and more expensive. And so in the 1900s, we started to think, what if not everybody was paying these land taxes? And it wasn't just the landowners, but it was homeowners as well. And from the 1900s, when we started to kind of buy property, not land, property. So you could buy leasehold, not freehold. And you could buy a house, but the renters of the houses that didn't own them, so homeowners had to pay local taxes, but the renters weren't paying. And those who were paying, the wealthy and the emerging middle classes from the 1900s, they didn't like that. Fast forward a bit further, and Margaret Thatcher thought, well, the middle classes, who were her tax base, the people who were voting for Thatcher in the 70s, 80s, they didn't think renters who were not landowners or homeowners should have a say in the way that funds were being spent because they weren't contributing to them through local property taxes. And so we got the community charge, or the poll tax. Now, the poll tax was something that collapsed massively for a couple of reasons. And we rioted against this. So once upon a time, as a country, we absolutely knew and we were clued into things like property taxation. But they introduced the poll tax as a per capita tax, meaning that every adult in a household was responsible for paying. We didn't like this because it was disproportionately unfair. People were asked to pay the same rate, and instinctively we knew this wasn't fair. Now, that was Thatcher's mistake. So once Margaret Thatcher had gone, John Major and his friends came into government, and they said, listen, we still want our middle class and our sort of donors and the people who are the wealthy landowners still don't want to pay this, but let's make a version of the poll tax that looks more reasonable. So we'll make it look bureaucratic, because we loved a bit of bureaucracy back then. So fine, we'll give you a single person discount, and we'll put property into bands, and we won't make absolutely everybody pay. Like, we'll have reasonable sounding exemptions like nurses or students or apprentices or carers. And so we've got a raft of discounts and exemptions now in council tax that are designed really to make the system appear much fairer than the poll tax was. So we've gone in with the poll tax and said, this is absolutely dreadful. Everybody hated it. So we've kind of fixed it, but really they didn't, because the whole point of this was to shift the responsibility of funding the poor, remember, the peasants on the land, the working class and the industrialists, and now just like ordinary people, we're shifting the responsibility of funding social care and education, which once was the responsibility of the lord of the land, and now is becoming the responsibility of homeowners. Fast forward to council tax, and it becomes the responsibility of renters themselves. So at every stage, responsibility for paying for social care and education has been pushed down and down and down to the lowest possible level, so that wealthy landowners didn't have to fund services for the poor. Council tax is the final boss of this journey, whereby we now fund our own social care and our own education and public health through local taxation, through local domestic property taxation for these reasons. Now, since then, council tax has done untold damage, but that's subjects for other council tax rants. But the more you know, we need better policy. There are reasons why we go after landlords and wealthy landowners, and there are reasons why they ought to be funding services and not the idle or incompetent poor, which is how the renters of the day were described in the poor laws.